Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise Yahuwah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise Yahuwah, praise Yahuwah. I will call upon Yahuwah to do his word and to be saved from mine enemies. Rise up, O Yahuwah. Let thine enemies be scattered. Let them that hate thee flee from before thee. Hallelujah. 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 Praise Yahuwah. I'd like to welcome everyone to Qodeshnation and to our Shabbat class. Brothers and sisters, the lesson and message for today comes in the form of a question. And that is this: are you in a mind control cult? Are you in a mind control cult? Praise Yahuwah. And this is also going to be somewhat of a personal testimony, brothers and sisters, because my aim in this message and lesson is that if you can identify with the things that I'm going to bring out here, and you find that you are in a mind control cult, that you may deliver yourself and your loved ones out of it. Praise Yahuwah. Some people are in one, they don't realize it because they don't know what to look for. They know deep inside something is not quite right, but they're not equipped with the tools to be able to take a firm scriptural stand and to get themselves free. Praise Yahuwah. And see, I am able to minister on this, praise Yahuwah, not just because I know the scriptures regarding this, but personal experience that myself, my family, we were in a mind control cult for almost a decade. Praise Yahuwah. And this is the case with many of these mind control cults, is that when I first joined up with this particular ministry, it wasn't as bad as it ultimately ended up being. I didn't realize that I was in a mind control cult in the very beginning. Praise Yahuwah. But as things developed, that's when my eyes ended up being open. So I believe that through the scriptures, but also through my experience, that I'll be able to help some of you all. Because some of you all are in situations where you know something isn't right, you can't put a finger on it. Praise Yahuwah. Well, today we're going to bring out some things that are going to allow you to put a finger on it, because I have a particular interest in bringing forth this type of message to our people, the lost sheep of the house of Yashrael, so-called black folk, and especially so-called black folk that are in the so-called black churches. Because the activities that I'm going to expose, that we see these activities now, this is common to all men, but particularly we see these activities taking place in churches where there's a lot of our people. Whether the leadership is Hebrews or whether the leadership's Gentiles. Sometimes you have Gentiles that have mostly Hebrews that are sitting under them. But nevertheless, I have found in my personal experience an inordinate amount of Hebrews that get caught up in these mind control cults. And what I believe is that these mind control cults are more effective with Hebrews than with Gentiles because of our legacy and our legacy of oppression. That we have been mentally conditioned through slavery now. We have been mentally conditioned to accept oppression, control, manipulation, abuse, more so than the Gentiles. I've seen situations where that Gentile men would feel dishonored by a pastor. They would feel that a pastor was getting out of his place with him in his family. That Gentile man would go up to the church, knock the pastor right out. And I have seen with my own two eyes grown men, Hebrews, grown men older than the pastor, and just sit and take verbal abuse and be talked down to like a child and stay in that ministry. I've seen it. I've seen it. Our people take abuse that white men just don't take. And it is because of this conditioning to accept the abuse, the control, the manipulation. Praise God. That's why the more well-known cults of history, like Jim Jones, David Koresh, these ones that got national attention, these people, they had a good number of Hebrews, black folk, that were following them. Praise Yahuwah. And so I believe that. I believe that is part of the curses, is falling under the leadership of these false shepherds that end up scattering the sheep. Praise Yahuwah. But brothers and sisters, praise Yahuwah, that I have extensive experience with this. You can see just through the passion with which I speak about this subject that I can help you with these things, because I know what I'm talking about. I've been there. I've seen it with my own two eyes. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's my aim. I want to give you some tools. I want to equip you today. I want to help you today to get yourself free if you are in this predicament. So once again, the message, the lesson, are you in a mind control cult? Now we're going to begin in 3 John. 3 John, 3rd Yochanan, the third letter of Yochanan only has one chapter. Praise Yah. So we're going to read 3 verses here, verses 9 through 11. It reads, I wrote to the assembly, but Diotrephes, who loves to be the first among them, does not receive us. So if I come, I shall call to mind his works which he does, babbling against us with wicked words, and not satisfied with that, he himself does not receive the brothers, and forbids those who want to, putting them out of the assembly. Beloved ones, do not imitate the evil, but the good. The one who is doing good is of Elohim, but he who is doing evil has not seen Elohim. Praise Yahuwah. Now, it's interesting because Yochanan, apparently, he tried to... Now, the assembly that he's talking about here is Ephesus. And he tried to write to this assembly, but apparently his letter is intercepted by this Diotrephes figure, who apparently had enough power in the Ephesian assembly that he was able to... do this. He was able to put people out of the assembly. He was able to not receive the brethren, the emissaries, the apostles. Praise Yahuwah. And so this is why he's writing to Gaius. Gaius, we look in verse 1 of this same letter, that this is a man who had a great love for the qodeshim and helped the qodeshim out. Very much so. Praise Yahuwah. And so he's writing this so that he can get his message across through Gaius, because he wrote it to the assembly in general, and apparently his message was intercepted. But if we look at this Diotrephes person, this man more than anyone else in the scriptures and the writings is the best example I can find of a mind control cult leader. Praise Yahuwah. And when you find mind control cult leaders of these modern times, they usually fit the pattern of this man's works. And so what we are going to do is we're going to break down the 3 main characteristics that we see about this man. And we're going to bring out more scripture concerning it. Praise Yahuwah. And we're going to show how men fulfill this, how men manifest this. that the first characteristic is how they love to be first. And the King James says, loveth to have the preeminence. So love to be first. That's the first characteristic. Second characteristic is babbling against others with wicked words. And so I put an emphasis on babbling, where it's not just speaking a word or two against others, against brethren, leaders, but there's babbling. It goes on and on. It's very excessive. There's an obsession with this speaking of wicked words, evil words, abusive words against other brethren. And then number 3, not receiving the brethren and excommunicating or shunning those who do. In other words, it's not enough for one who has the spirit of Diotrephes to hate somebody, that you have to hate them too. Or else you're not cool with Diotrephes if you don't share his hatred for other brethren now. Praise Yahuwah. So these are the 3 main characteristics that we are going to look at. Praise Yahuwah. And so the first one, loving to be first. If we turn to Matthew 20, loving to be first. What I want to do is that I want to bring out Yahushua's teaching about this very subject, about being first. What did Yahushua teach about this? Praise Yah. What did Yahushua teach about this? Now, Matthew chapter 20, and we are going to start in verse 20. It reads, Then the mother of the sons of Zabdi came to him, to Yahushua, with her sons, bowing down and making a request of him. And he said to her, What do you want? And she said to him, Command that these 2 sons of mine might sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your reign. But Yahushua answering said, You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, or to be immersed with the immersion that I am immersed with? They said to him, We are able. And he said to them, You shall indeed drink my cup, and you shall be immersed with the immersion that I am immersed with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were displeased at the 2 brothers. But Yahushua called them near and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles are masters over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever wants to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Ben of Adam, the Son of Man, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his chai, his life, as a ransom for many. Praise Yahuwah. So this is a powerful teaching here, because this is in direct contrast to the leadership of that day, and we're going to see in detail how the leadership of that day was when we talk about the chief priests, the elders, the scribes, the Pharisees. But here Yahushua is talking about servant leadership, and how the greatest is he who serves, and how Yahushua himself even gave an example of servant leadership by his life. Praise Yahuwah. And so, because we see the mindset, we see the mindset of the Talmudim at this time, the disciples, and how just wanting to be first, and wanting to wanting to stand out. And Yahushua had to bring correction and say, no, that's not what it's about. Being first is not about standing out. It's not about looking good in front of others. Praise Yahuwah. And so a very powerful teaching here, showing the difference between a true Yah-led leader, praise Yahuwah, and a Gentile, a typical Gentile leader, praise Yah, because these controlling, abusive leadership styles, that's where we get them from. We get them from the Gentiles, praise Yahuwah, because that's how they do their people. The reason why we see so many abusive, unawakened Hebrew pastors, praise Yahuwah, is because we learn this abuse, this control, this manipulation from the Gentile slave masters. It was passed down. This legacy was passed down from generation to generation. But see, that's not how Yah taught his leaders to be. And you're going to see a little later in this that even in the Torah we see servant leadership being commanded. Praise Yahuwah. All right, Mark 9. Turn to Mark 9. Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9. In Mark chapter 9, and we're going to start in verse 33. And they came to Capharnaum, and having come in the house, he asked them, What was it you disputed among yourselves on the way? And they were silent, for on the way they had disputed with one another who was the greatest. And sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, If anyone wants to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. And he took a little child and put him in their midst, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, Whoever receives one of such little children in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. Praise Yahuwah. So being last of all, servant of all. And it's interesting that, he brings this little child to himself, saying, Whoever receives this little child, one of such little children in my name receives me. Praise Yahuwah, because these Diotrephes leaders, they tend to receive those that are great and powerful, and they could maybe give a lot of money to them, or people who they could make use of, whereas a little child just seems to be so insignificant. Praise Yahuwah. So, last of all and servant of all, that is the true way to be first, and that's who Yahushua was. He was truly last of all and servant of all, and that's why he is first. That's why he is the one to whom all power in the Shamayim and the Eretz, the heavens and the earth, have been given. Praise Yah. All right, now, Yochanan 13, John 13. I just want to lay a foundation and show the plumb line. Show what Yahushua actually taught about this subject before we talk about how men have deviated from this. Now, Yochanan, John 13. I'm just going to read a few verses here. This is the chapter talking about Yahushua washing the feet of the Talmudim, the disciples. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to pick up in verse 13. It reads, You call me teacher and Adon, and you say, Well, for I am. If I, Adon and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is an emissary greater than he who sent him. If you know these, Baruch are you if you do them. Praise Yahuwah. So once again, Yahushua set the example for servant leadership. And this is how the apostles, the emissaries, were to relate to one another. That they were to wash one another's feet. They were to be servants one of another. And so if you see one, praise Yahuwah, see someone calling themselves an emissary or an apostle, but striving against his brethren and fellow leaders, that that's not a true apostle. Praise Yah, because that's contrary to what Yahushua taught. Hallelujah. Now, told you how the Torah even teaches servant leadership. Turn with me to Devarim, Deuteronomy 17. I want to show that to you. Deuteronomy chapter 17. We're going to start in verse 14 of Devarim, Deuteronomy 17. It reads, When you come to the land which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you, and shall possess it, and shall dwell in it, and you shall say, Let me appoint a sovereign over me like all the Gentiles that are around me, you shall certainly appoint a sovereign over you, whom Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose. Appoint a sovereign over you from among your brothers. You are not allowed to appoint a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he is not to increase horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Mitzrayim to increase horses. For Yahuwah has said to you, do not return that way again. And he is not to increase wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. And it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his reign, that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book, from the one before the Kohanim, the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he learns to revere Yahuwah his Elohim, and guard all the words of this Torah and these laws to do them, so that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers, and so as not to turn aside from the command, right or left, so that he prolongs his days in the reign, he and his children, in the midst of Yashral. Praise Yahuwah. And so there we have it. This is the effect that the Torah should have on a leader. Cause him to be humble and not exalt himself above his brothers. So that shows you that controlling, manipulative, abusive, mind control, cult leaders, they go contrary to Torah. They do not keep the Torah. A lot of times they even speak against the Torah. They are anti-Torah, because if you look at so many commands of the Torah, commands that we have regard for those that are weaker in our society and in our nation, the poor, the widow, the fatherless, the stranger, and just the command to show them compassion and to do them right and to not take advantage of them. That's what much of the Torah is commanding. And so, of course, if a leader really gets that down in him, then he'll practice that and bring forth the fruit thereof. Praise Yahuwah. All right, now let's turn to, go back to Matthew. No, I'm sorry, 1 Samuel 18. Let's go to Samuel first, and then we'll go to Matthew. 1 Samuel chapter 18. So I want to give an example of a leader who loves to be the first, loves to have the preeminence. I want to show you what this looks like. In 1 Samuel chapter 18, we're going to start in verse 6. It reads, And it came to be as they came in, as Daud was returning from smiting the Palestine, that the women came out from all the cities of Yashraal, singing and dancing, to meet Shaul the sovereign with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang as they danced, and said, Shaul smote his thousands, and Daud his 10,000s. And Shaul was very wroth, and this matter was evil in his eyes. And he said, To Daud they have given 10,000s, and to me they have given thousands. So what more for him except the rain? And from that day on Shaul eyed Daud. Praise Yahuwah. And see, Shaul should not have been surprised, because he was told twice already that the reign, the kingdom, would be removed from him and given to a man better than him. So this was the word of Yah, and still he's acting like this. But Shaul just could not bear this, because he was so huge in his own eyes. And to hear other people attributing the 10,000s to Daud and the thousands to him. See, this is a mark of a leader with the spirit of Diotrephes, loving to be first. Praise Yahuwah. Loves to hog the attention. And one thing that we found when we were in this mind control cult, praise Yahuwah, and this was down in Louisiana, praise Yahuwah, that the leader, the pastor that we were sitting under, that he never seemed to maintain much of a relationship with other preachers. He would have other preachers down to minister, but he always seemed to have the preeminence above them. You know, he would get up even after these preachers would leave, and he would cut them down before us and say negative things about them before us. And he would make sure that we thought more of him than the visiting preachers. So he wasn't preferring anybody in honor and esteeming others better than himself. He was esteeming himself to be better. One example of this is that when we were down there, when we were down in Louisiana, we had a guest preacher come. A guest preacher with a strong track record of healing and deliverance. Yah was using this man in the area of healing and deliverance. And so he came and he was speaking to us, and what he said before our congregation, he said that, if you all want to, learn more about the ministry of healing and deliverance, that, y'all can send a couple elders up to where we are, and we could teach you what we do. And I'll tell you what, our pastor could not bear that at all. And he was so upset about that, because see, what that made it look like the visiting preacher had a greater healing and deliverance ministry than the hosting pastor who we were sitting under. And he could not bear that, because he had to be the greater one in our eyes and everybody's eyes than the visiting preacher. Right. And so that really caused things to fall out between them. Things really started going south at that point. So this is the kind of thing that we have seen with our own two eyes, because it was just the plain truth. There wasn't a lot of healing and deliverance going on in the ministry that we sat under, but this visiting preacher, it was going on a lot more so in his ministry. Now, granted, it may have been wiser for this visiting preacher to speak to the pastor in private and tell him to feel free to send a delegation up to his place rather than just bring it out without the pastor knowing about it. But just seeing how the pastor responded, how it hurt his pride, hurt his ego. See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Visiting preachers would come and preach for us down there, and people would just react. People would really get with that preacher, and even getting up on pews and just cheering and shouting, and people would get excited. And then that visiting preacher would leave, and this pastor that we were sitting under, he would rebuke the congregation, because we would get with that visiting preacher like that, but we wouldn't get with him as much as we got with the visiting preacher. Just that jealousy of seeing visiting preachers just getting more. He felt they were getting more praise and more honor than him. And he would rebuke us from the pulpit for doing that. That's what I'm talking about. Praise Yahuwah. The same thing I'm reading about Shaul here. It's the spirit of Diotrephes here. Praise Yahuwah. Really, Diotrephes had the spirit of Shaul upon him, because Shaul came first. Praise Yah. But it's the same prideful, narcissistic, self-absorbed, egotistical, self-centered spirit that was upon both of them. Praise Yahuwah. And so I'm just giving you an example of this. Now let's turn to Matthew 23. Matthew chapter 23. Are you in a mind control cult? Are the things I'm saying resonating with you yet? Praise Yahuwah. Have you seen some of the same things that I'm bringing out? Matthew 23, we're going to start at the top. It says, Then Yahushua spoke to the crowds in his Talmudim, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Mashah. Therefore, whatever he says to you to guard, guard and do, but do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but with their finger they do not want to move them. And they do all their works to be seen by men. They make their tefillin wide and lengthen the seat of their garments, and they love the best place at feasts and the best seats in the congregations and the greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, Hamashiach, and you are all brothers. And call none on earth your father, for one is your Father, who is in the Shamayim. Neither be called leaders, for one is your leader, Hamashiach. But the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. So we see that Yahushua's teaching in this area was consistent. You've got to humble yourself, especially if you are a leader. The greatest among you shall be your servant. So this was another thing that we experienced in this mind control cult that we were in Louisiana. And that is the exaggerated places of honor. And one area of this would be honorific titles. Honorific titles. The pastor of this assembly, when I first went down there in 1998, we would address this pastor as Brother So-and-so. Brother So-and-so. Now, I was a part of this ministry from 1998 to 2001, and I left for about 3 years, but I ended up coming back. I ended up getting back with the ministry in 2004. When I came back in 2004, that people were not addressing him as Brother So-and-so anymore. Now that he was being addressed as Bishop So-and-so, and he made that an ordinance in the assembly. Nobody call him brother. Everybody address him as Bishop So-and-so. So we call him Bishop or Bishop So-and-so. And since then, since we had left the ministry in 2010, that honorific title has elevated to Apostle. And now he is addressed as Apostle So-and-so. So same thing we're reading about the Pharisees and how they love the greetings in the marketplace and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Yahushua said not to do that. Don't be called Rabbi. One is your master, even Mashiach, and you are all brothers. But we saw this. We saw these exaggerated places of honor where brethren were actually taught to carry the pastor's briefcase for him, open doors for him, take his coat off for him, put his coat back on for him, walk him to his car, open his car door for him, start his vehicle, start his wife's vehicle, turn the air conditioning on in their vehicles. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. These exaggerated places of honor. That doesn't sound like Yahushua to me, where he said he didn't come to be served. He came to serve, give his life a ransom for many. But that's the opposite. That's what you would expect for a political dignitary, like a president of a country. That's the same Gentile leaders that Yahushua was contrasting his leaders with. He's saying, don't be like them. This is how you are supposed to be. Praise Yahuwah. But see, brothers and sisters, one reason why, because this is something, the honorific titles in the exaggerated places of honor, that this is something that's very particular and peculiar to the Hebrew community. You don't see a whole lot of white men doing this as far as, in the religious sphere. I'm not saying there's none. There's some, but you really see a good number of Hebrew men doing this. And I believe the reason for this is that we as Hebrew men, that we have faced so much dishonor, disrespect, and degradation over the generations, that some men do that to overcompensate for that. And so instead of just desiring to be honored, it becomes an exaggerated sense where you want these great titles and you want this big throne to sit on in the pulpit area. And you want the ladies to fan you and feed you grapes, and just this aggrandizement as somewhat of a overcompensation for your insecurities, for feeling dishonored like that. Praise Yahuwah. I really believe that is the case, brothers and sisters. But that's what we're seeing here, and that's what I've seen with my own two eyes. What we're seeing here with the Pharisees. and how they lifted themselves up so high. Praise Yahuwah. So, loving to be first. Loving to have the preeminence. Praise Yahuwah. I sat under another such preacher. Now, this isn't the main preacher I'm talking about, but I sat under another such preacher. This man was a Gentile, actually. Praise Yahuwah. But this man was obsessed with his anointing, quote unquote. That we went to a camp meeting one time, and he preached for another preacher. And this other preacher opened the camp meeting up and gave a beautiful, powerful message. And then the next morning, the pastor I was sitting under, like I said, this is a different one than the main one I'm talking about here. This is before I went to this ministry. That he preached the next morning, and my roommate, friend of mine, was actually rooming with him during this camp meeting, and I was rooming with somebody else. And this preacher asked my roommate, this is after the meeting was over, he said, "Hey, who do you think was the most anointed? Who do you think was the most anointed? You think it was me or the other preacher?" The hosting preacher. Praise Yahuwah. And of course my roommate, just wanting to give him the answer that he wanted to hear, said, "Oh yeah, I think you were." And he goes, "Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, I think I was." And so that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Just preachers today just wanting to be the most anointed, wanting to be the most revelatory. Praise Yahuwah. So if you see this, praise Yahuwah, then you are seeing the spirit of Diotrephes upon a preacher, because that is exactly how Yahusha taught his ministers not to be. Taught us to be humble. Taught us to be last of all, servant of all. The greatest among us is the one who serves. Praise Yahuwah. All right. So, second thing is we are going to deal with the babbling against others with wicked words. In the King James it says, prating against us with malicious words, hateful words. But the babbling, praise Yahuwah, and this is something that we have personally witnessed too, that when somebody would get on the preacher's bad side, I'm talking about the original preacher here, praise Yahuwah, in this ministry we were in, me and my family, for about 10 years, or for about a decade, not quite that long. But when somebody would get on his bad side, this man would spend an entire sermon babbling, pouring out abusive words against that particular person. That we would come to service and sit through 2 or 3 hours of this babbling. There would be no edification, no teaching. It was just a constant bashing of somebody who got on his bad side. And so that's what I'm talking about, the babbling. Babbling against the brethren with wicked words. Praise Yahuwah. Now, let's turn to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to see what Yahushua taught about this. Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 21. It reads, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that whoever is wroth with his brother without a cause shall be liable to judgment, and whoever says to his brother Raka shall be liable to the Sanhedrin. But whoever says you fool shall be liable to fire of Gehinnom. If then you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother holds whatever against you, leave your gift there before the altar, and go first make peace with your brother, and then come and offer your gift." Praise Yahuwah. So it shows the importance of stamping out any potential for a grudge to be nursed between you and another brother. But also it talks about watching what you say. Praise Yah, watching what you say. Whosoever says you fool shall be liable to the fire of Gehinnom. So watching your tongue, watching what you say. Praise Yah. All right. As we continue, Matthew 12. Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12, we're going to start in verse 22. It reads, Then they brought to him one who was demon-possessed, blind and dumb, and he healed him so that the blind and dumb man both spoke and saw. And all the crowds were amazed and said, Is this the Ben of Daud? For when the Pharisees heard it, they said, This one does not cast out demons except by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons. And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said to them, Every reign divided against itself is laid waste, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then does his reign stand? And if I by Beelzebul cast out demons, by whom do your sons cast them out? Because of this they shall be your judges. But if I cast out demons by the Ruach of Elohim, then the reign of Elohim has come upon you. Or, how is one able to enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods, unless he first binds the strong man, and then he shall plunder his house? He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters abroad. But because of this I say to you, all sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven men, but the blasphemy against the Ruach shall not be forgiven men. And whoever speaks a word against the Ben of Adam, it shall be forgiven him. But whoever speaks against the Ruach HaKodesh, it shall not be forgiven him, either in this age or in the age to come. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree rotten and its fruit rotten, for a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of adders, how are you able to speak what is good, being wicked? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. The good man brings forth what is good from the good treasure of his heart, and the wicked man brings forth what is wicked from the wicked treasure. And I say to you that for every idle word men speak, they shall give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you shall be declared righteous, and by your words you shall be declared unrighteous. So again, Yahushua taught to be very careful about what comes out of your mouth. Praise Yahuwah. That is no joke, because it's something that could snare you. It's something that can really get you in trouble with Yah. Praise Yah. So there's a big difference between being careful with your words. Even a fool, when he holds his peace, he's considered to be wise. Praise Yah. The Proverbs talks about that, about the multitude of words. There wanteth not sin, and just being real choicey with your words. There's a big difference between that and just babbling, running at the mouth. There was a woman making reference to this preacher that I'm talking about, this pastor, and she said that the man had diarrhea mouth. Because when you have diarrhea, you have the runs. It just runs and runs and runs. And she was very correct in describing what this man would do when he got angry and upset with somebody, and how he'd get up at the pulpit and just tear them down and run on and run on and run on. We're talking not obeying the teaching of Yahushua, not being careful with his words, but running on and on for hours, babbling with wicked words against the person who upset him. That it was just an obsession. Praise Yahuwah. And so we see that Yahushua taught against this. Now, Yaakov, James. Look at James chapter 4. James chapter 4. Verses 11 and 12. Brothers, do not speak against one another. He that speaks against a brother and judges his brother speaks against Torah and judges Torah. And if you judge Torah, you are not a doer of Torah, but a judge. There is one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? And so here we have Yaakov, who stuck very closely to the teachings of his brother, Yahushua, his blood brother. Praise Yahuwah, talking about speaking against your brother. Brothers, do not speak against one another. Hallelujah. All right, first Kappa, 1 Peter. 1 Peter 3. We're going to start in verse 8. 1 Peter 3, verse 8. Kepha, another emissary, apostle who stuck very closely to the teachings of Yahushua, says to sum up, verse 8, chapter 3, verse 8, to sum up, let all of you be like-minded, sympathetic, loving as brothers, tender-hearted, humble-minded, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. But on the contrary, barakah, knowing that you are called to this in order to inherit a barakah. For he who was to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it, because the eyes of Yahuwah are on the righteous and his ears are open to their prayers. But the face of Yahuwah is against those who do evil. Praise Yahuwah. And so we see Yahushua, we see Yaakov or James, we see Kepha, Peter, just teaching to be very careful about what we speak towards one another. Praise Yahuwah. So being very careful to tame the tongue. Now, what I want to look at next is Psalm 119. Psalm 119, we're going to look at King Daud. And we're going to look at just what he had to endure, just the persecution he had to endure, praise Yahuwah, in his time. Talking about speaking against the brethren with wicked words. All right, Psalm 119, verse 51. The proud have utterly scorned me. I did not turn aside from your Torah. And so Daud was utterly scorned by the proud. We know Shaul was proud. King Shaul. Praise Yahuwah. And so we know he had scornful words toward Daud. But the proud, just in general, the proud have utterly scorned me. To scorn is to mock, to ridicule, to belittle. So speaking wicked words against him, and they were proud. See, that's the characteristic of a proud man. Speaking wicked words. Praise Yahuwah. Because of their pride. Proud people want to magnify themselves and diminish others. That's why they have no problem speaking wicked words against even their own brethren. Praise Yahuwah. Now, jumping ahead, verse 69 tells us another characteristic of proud people. Verse 69, the proud have forged a lie against me. With all heart I observe your orders. And so, proud people tend to lie, bear false witness against others, because their aim, like I said, is to magnify themselves and diminish others. And if they can't magnify themselves and diminish others with truth, they'll do it with a lie. They will lie. They will lie through their teeth in order to make themselves look greater and to make their brethren look lesser. And this is something we experience in this mind control cult. That we saw this mind control cult leader just lie through his teeth in order to keep up a certain image before his congregation. Praise Yahuwah. You know, lie about people and just really slander people's testimony. Praise Yah. In order for him to look a certain way before others, because he was proud. Daud said, the proud have forged a lie against me. The proud have utterly scorned me. Praise Yahuwah. We have seen much utter scorning, mockery, ridicule, belittlement, as well as flat out lying. Praise Yahuwah. That this is another thing that the preacher would do when people would get on his bad side. He would scorn them from the pulpit. Mock, ridicule them. He'd want you to laugh at that person as he would just belittle the person in front of others and continue on with it again and again. This is what I've experienced. See, I'm bringing this out because I want you to be able to connect with this. Have you seen this? Have you seen this type of thing take place? Are you in this particular predicament right now? Praise Yahuwah. Because if you are, then I want you to know what you're dealing with. Hallelujah. All right. So that's, we're reading about Daud. Now turn to Psalm 35. Psalm 35. It's another thing Daud experienced with people speaking wickedly against him. In verse 11, Psalm 35, it says, malicious witnesses rise up. They ask me that which I knew not. They reward me evil for good, bereaving my life. But I, when they were sick, I put on sackcloth. I humbled my being with fastings, and my prayer would return to my own bosom. I walked about as though he were my friend or brother. I bowed down mourning as one mourning for a mother. But they rejoiced at my stumbling and gathered together. The smiters gathered against me, and I did not know it. They tore in pieces without ceasing. With unclean ones, mockers at feasts, gnashing at me with their teeth. Praise Yahuwah. So returning evil for good, even people that are not attacking them, even people that are showing them love and praying for them, still getting up and tearing such people down. Praise Yahuwah. See, this is what a mind control cult leader does, because he has no control over his tongue. Praise Yahuwah. So speaking against the brethren with wicked words. Praise Yah. Now, Luke chapter 16, we're going to see how Yahushua experienced this. Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, we're going to start in verse 10. It reads, he who is trustworthy in the least is trustworthy also in much, and he who is unrighteous in what is least is unrighteous also in much. If therefore you have not been trustworthy in the unrighteous wealth, who shall entrust to you the truth? And if you have not been trustworthy in what is another man's, who shall give you what is your own? No servant is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cling to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and wealth. And the Pharisees who loved silver also heard all this, and they were sneering at him. So he said to them, you are those who declare yourselves righteous before men, but Elohim knows your hearts, because what is highly thought of among men is an abomination in the sight of Elohim. See, they sought so much to be highly thought of among men, to receive honor from men, but not even realizing that's abominable in the sight of Yah. Yah's not impressed with that. Yah's not impressed with what men are impressed with. Praise Yahuwah. But here we see the Pharisees were sneering at him. In other versions it says they derided him. They mocked, ridiculed, belittled Yahushua, because they were so threatened by his presence. Because he had real miracles, signs, and wonders emanating from him. And the people's hearts were being turned toward him. People were believing in him, and they were losing their audience, and they were being made to look lesser. So they had to do something to greaten themselves and diminish Yahushua. And so they would slander him. They'd say he's casting out devils by the power of Beelzebul. Praise Yahuwah, by demonic powers. He'd make him out like he was a magician or something, in order to lift themselves up and put Yahushua down. So speaking against the brethren with wicked words. Praise Yahuwah. It's another characteristic of a mind control cult leader. Praise Yahuwah. See, these are ways, scriptures I brought out, examples I've given of what I've experienced. Hopefully this will help you determine whether or not you are in a mind control cult. Because hopefully by now, as I've said, that you may have felt in your ruach something's not quite right. I can't put my finger on it. But hopefully by now you're able to put your finger on some things. Because I brought some clarity to this thing. I've exposed this spirit. Praise Yahuwah, especially if you're in the churches, the so-called black churches. Praise Yahuwah. And, you wonder, because I talk about just the control, the manipulation. And one thing that the so-called black church has a bad reputation for is that you have the preacher that takes all these tithes and offerings from the people, drives this fine car, and the state of the people just does not change. Year after year, generation after generation. And I used to wonder about that. I used to wonder about that because, preachers used to preach, especially this preacher I'm talking about here. Preachers used to preach about, you'll be blessed. You'll be blessed if you give to the ministry. That all, give and it shall be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. And quote the giving scriptures. Praise Yahuwah, and threaten with Malachi that praise Yahuwah about robbing him of the tithes and offerings, and threaten with Haggai saying you're going to have bags with holes. You don't give to the ministry. And so we were taught this, and I would see people give their guts out. I would see people go into deep debt for the ministry, and I wouldn't see their situation change. And I would say to myself, well, what's going on here? I thought we're supposed to be so blessed. And people who give far more than I give, that I see them stay at about the same level. And I believe that there is a barakah, a blessing in giving at any level. But what I truly believe is that a lot of people in the so-called black church, that they're not elevated financially for a couple reasons. Number one, in their giving, see, the true barakah is giving to the poor, the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger, and the Levite. Praise Yahuwah. Giving to those in need. Praise Yah. Not giving to some preacher's building fund, or giving, so some preacher can live high. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's where the true barakah is. That's where I believe a person will be rewarded the most, is giving in the right areas. And a lot of times our people aren't really giving in the right areas. They're just giving according to what the preacher's preaching. Praise Yah. And the preacher uses that money to build up himself and build up his image and his own ministry. Praise Yah. And but another reason is this, praise Yah, that I don't believe it's necessarily wrong for a leader to ask for money. But if a leader is smart, especially when you're dealing with people that don't have a lot of money, praise Yah, and dealing with our people, teach people how to save their money. Teach people how to invest their money so that when they give to you, they can have something left over for themselves to live off of, and to increase and be able to give you more down the road. Praise Yah. And so that's one thing that the so-called black church has a bad reputation for, not really doing much for the people or the community. But look at the preacher. Look at the preacher's clothes. Look at the preacher's car. Praise Yahuwah. And there are some preachers who do this very thing that I'm talking about. They actually teach their people how to manage their money, how to save, how to invest, as well as giving, and they do increase. And they do prosper as a result. Praise Yah. You know that in Proverbs it says there's treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but the fool spends it up. Proverbs even teaches you to save your money. Praise Yah. But the preacher we sat under said, no, you empty that savings account for the building fund. Praise Yahuwah. And the thing is that, see, sometimes it takes going outside of the ministry that you're at and telling people about it and seeing the alarm that people experience when they hear you tell it, praise Yah, to really know that you're in a mind control cult. Because you could be in it for so long that it becomes normal to you, that you become numb to it. Praise Yahuwah. But see, you tell others it's what you experience, praise Yah, and people are in shock and dismay, and I would have never put up with that. Praise Yah. See, that's another way you could tell something's not quite right in the situation that I'm in. So one prime example that I'm talking about, brothers and sisters, would be this, that when you're dealing with these mind control cult leaders, they are so wrapped up in themselves, their needs, their vision, that they forget about everybody else. That you had brethren, you had young brethren in the assembly, and I was one of them. Young brethren with new families, young brethren that would marry a sister that had children, whether it's one child or a few children. And you know that when you marry a sister that has children, I mean, you're going to need some money. You're going to need to be able to take care of her and take care of those children. Praise Yahuwah. And this mind control cult leader, that he had brethren in that predicament, this newly married brethren, marrying sisters with children, and still just ask for just about everything they've got, money-wise. Praise Yahuwah. I remember that we had a building fund going, and this cult leader called himself asking the congregation for 90% of their income tax check. Praise Yahuwah. Now, because see, he knew that by these multiple children, having all these children, there's got to be a lot of tax money. And so he asked for 90% of our income tax check for 2 years in a row. Now, I said ask, but there was a lot of arm twisting going on. He would ask, but at the same time, that he made it very clear that if you didn't do it, then you were not with him. You were not supportive of him. I remember that this man had people in the congregation get up one by one, and he would ask them as they stood up by themselves and everybody else sitting down, he'd say, all right, what are you going to do for the ministry financially? Are you going to give? Are you going to give the 90%? And so you're put in a predicament where that if you say you're not, then you're going to look like you're not loyal. And there was a sister that said that, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. We got this or that. And this preacher said, oh, so you're not with me then, huh? So you're not with me. So that's what I'm talking about, calling yourself asking for money, but it was really manipulating. It was really arm twisting. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, being so self-absorbed that not even realizing the needs of the people around you. You have people with families and children to feed and people that have bills and whatnot. Praise Yahuwah. And see, that's not emunah. That's not trusting in Yah. That's trusting in the arm of flesh when we have to control and manipulate people like that. Praise Yahuwah. Instead of trusting Yah to touch people's hearts or bring people from different places that are able to give the financial support that you need for whatever you're dealing with. Praise Yahuwah. And so it was a sad thing because it's like we gave all this money. You know, we gave what we were asked too. Praise Yah. And we gave all this money toward a building fund where the project never ended up being completed. There's still things that were undone, and the project never even came to completion by the time that building was sold. Praise Yah. So, I mean, does this resonate with you? You know, can you identify with what I'm talking about as far as the way that you may have been dealt with financially, your finances, and people asking for money out of you? Praise Yah. Now, I will say this, you know, I do want to say this as a disclaimer, because there are many Israelites that have been in controlling, manipulative, abusive situations financially, but because of that, they get over on this Israelite side and then they don't want to give anything. See, now I'm not promoting that, praise Yahuwah, but what I am promoting is that you should give, but your giving should be focused on the poor, the widow, the fatherless, those in need. Praise Yahuwah. Not necessarily to some ministry. I'm not saying don't give to ministries. Praise Yahuwah. But if you do give to a ministry, then you need to know where that money is going, that you're giving to a ministry. Give to brethren that you know are responsible with those finances. And even if it's a brother that needs some financial support in order to stay on YouTube and continue with the ministry, then, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Praise Yahuwah. Because supporting the Levite was part of supporting the ministry as far as back then. But it was really upon those that could not support themselves. Praise Yahuwah. I mean, we've had people send us financial support, and we're very thankful for it. Praise Yah, but at the same time, I'm able to work. You know, I go out, I work, I earn the income for my family. Praise Yah. And so the focus of the giving should be to help those that are not able to help themselves. That's where the greatest barakah is, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's the second category that we talked about as far as babbling against the brethren with wicked words. The third thing that I want to talk about is not receiving the brethren and excommunicating or shunning those who do. Now turn to 1 Samuel chapter 20. Are you in a mind control cult? Ask yourself that question. Are you in a mind control cult? First Samuel 20. And we're going to start in verse 24. It reads, And Daud hid in the field, and when the new moon came, the sovereign sat down by the food to eat. And the sovereign sat on his seat, as at other times, on a seat by the wall, with Jehonathan standing and Abner sitting by Shaul's side, but the place of Daud was empty. But Shaul did not speak anything that day, for he thought, It is an accident, he is not clean, for he has not been cleansed. And it came to be the next day, the second day of the month, that Daud's place was empty. And Shaul said to Jehonathan, his son, Why has the son of Yeshai not come to eat either yesterday or today? And Jehonathan answered Shaul, Daud earnestly asked for leave to Beth-lechem, and he said, Please let me go, for our clan has a slaughtering in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. And now, if I have found favor in your eyes, please let me get away and see my brothers. This is why he has not come to the sovereign's table. Then the displeasure of Shaul burned against Jehonathan, and he said to him, You son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Yeshai to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Yeshai lives on the earth, you shall not be established, and you and your reign. And now send and bring him to me, for he is a son of death. And Jehonathan answered Shaul his father and said to him, Why should he be put to death? What has he done? At that Shaul hurled a spear at him to smite him. Then Jehonathan knew that his father had resolved to put Daud to death. And Jehonathan rose up from the table in the heat of displeasure and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for Daud because his father put him to shame. So here King Shaul was going to kill his own son because he had just about lost his mind over this situation with Daud. Praise Yah. And so here he had a burning hatred for Daud, and he was so mad because his son did not share that hatred. And he was so mad at his son that he was willing to kill him. And so this is what a mind control cult leader is like, brothers and sisters. They want you to share their hatred for others. And that's the reason for the shunning and the excommunicating, how they'll cut somebody off and then they will punish you if it's found that you're talking to that person. That you'll be put out too. You'll be excommunicated too. You'll be shunned too if it's found that you're talking to that person who he has shunned. And so they want to control who you do and who you don't talk to. Praise Yahuwah. It's talking grown folks now. You know, like your little children. Praise Yahuwah. And so, brothers and sisters, that I want to, when it comes to this idea of shunning and excommunicating, praise Yahuwah. When we look in the Torah, you know, we see that people were to be cut off for certain things, certain transgressions against Yahuwah, that they were to be cut off from the congregation, cut off from the camp. And then sometimes people were just to be killed altogether. But in some cases, people were just to be cut off for offenses against Yahuwah. But you know, you need to ask yourself, where do these Diotrephes-like leaders get this idea from? Why are they so obsessed with excommunicating people, shunning people, and commanding you to shun them as well, and punishing you if you don't? Where do they get this from? And if you see them try to justify it biblically, I'll show you where they will go, and then I'm going to share my thoughts concerning this. because I believe this is very interesting. This is very peculiar. Now turn to Romans 16. Romans chapter 16. These are the Bible verses that mind control cult leaders typically go to justify their shunning and excommunicating. But I want you to pay close attention to the language that Shaul is using here, because I'm not endorsing what I'm reading here from the letters of Shaul. Most of you that have watched my videos for a while, you know our position on Shaul. And I'm not endorsing his letters as doctrine, but I'm reading what he has to say to make a point here. Now, Romans 16, verses 17 and 18, it says, "Now I call upon you, brothers, watch out for those who cause divisions and stumbling, contrary to the teaching which you have learned, and turn away from them. For such ones do not serve our Adon, Yahushua HaMashiach, but their own stomach, and by smooth words and flattering speech they deceive the hearts of the innocent." So, you notice that Shaul is telling you to turn away from those that cause divisions and stumbling, contrary to the teaching which you have learned. In other words, contrary to what I have taught you. Contrary to his teaching. All right, now, 2 Thessalonians, keep that in mind, 2 Thessalonians 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. I want to show you something else that Shaul said, and this is another passage that mind control cult leaders turn to in order to justify their shunning. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, it says, "And if anyone does not obey our word in this letter," our word in this letter, remember now, "note that one and do not keep company with him, so that he is put to shame. However, do not regard him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother." Praise Yahuwah. These mind control cult leaders, they don't even adhere to this 100%. They'll keep the first part, but not the second, like that. They won't go after that one sheep. They won't leave the 99 to go after that one to try to win them back, like that. But they certainly will not keep company with someone and shame that person and command his people to do so. And so this is what they use. Now, the thing I find peculiar about Paul's instruction, 2 different times, when dealing with excommunicating folks, is that it's based upon whether or not that they receive his teaching. Not necessarily based upon transgressions of Torah and a Torah basis for cutting somebody off. Praise Yahuwah. But going against what he teaches, for one. And then for two, that, and this is just my observation, I don't see anybody else talking like this. I don't see this from Kepha, Peter, Yaakov, James, John, praise Yahuwah, the true apostles, the 12. I don't see them talking like this. I don't see them talking about just shunning brothers and separating yourself, from other brethren. That what you hear about this is from Shaul. I don't really see this from others. And the basis for it is not receiving his teaching. That Shaul really seemed to have an obsession about people receiving his teaching. He even said in Galatians that if you don't, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you don't receive the gospel that he has given, whoever doesn't receive the gospel that he has given, let him be accursed. If even a malach, a messenger, anybody comes bringing any other gospel than what I have brought, let him be accursed. I don't see anybody else talking like that. I don't see anybody else so obsessed just with their own teaching that they're talking like that. And I say that this is peculiar because it really makes me wonder something. Now, Yochanan John dealt extensively with the assembly in Ephesus. We also know that Paul, Shaul, had dealings with the assembly in Ephesus. And from what I understand, that Yochanan actually founded that assembly. That's just my understanding of it. Now, Shaul had extensive dealings with Ephesus. Ephesus was the chief city in Asia. And later on, and we read this in the letters of Timothy, that Shaul says that all in Asia have forsaken me. All in Asia have forsaken me. In fact, he talks about a trial where nobody stood by his side. Praise Yahuwah. And so because of the results of this trial, that those in Asia, mainly talking about Ephesus, rejected Shaul. And on top of that, in Revelation 2, that here, the assembly in Ephesus is one of the 7 assemblies who Yahushua is dealing with in Asia at this time. Praise Yahuwah. And it's one of the only ones, it is Ephesus, and there might have been one other that we see Shaul dealing with. And the others we don't see Shaul dealing with. But the 7 assemblies in Asia, Ephesus was one of them. And Yahushua said, you have tried those who say that they're emissaries or apostles and are not, and you found them to be liars. Now, brothers and sisters, I don't believe that that's mere coincidence that Shaul talks about a trial in Ephesus where he ended up coming out on the bad end and ended up being rejected by all in Asia. Praise Yahuwah. And Shaul and Yahushua tells this same assembly, commends them for trying those who say that they're emissaries and are not, and found them to be liars. Praise Yahuwah. I believe that's pretty damning evidence, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah. And so here, Yochanan is talking about this leader in Ephesus. That he has enough power and influence that, number one, he doesn't receive the brethren now. He doesn't receive Yochanan, Yaakov, Kepha. He doesn't receive them. And that those who would receive them, he cast them out of the assembly. Who would have that kind of authority and power in Ephesus? Now, I know he uses the name Diotrephes, praise Yahuwah, but it does kind of make me wonder if he was really talking about somebody else. Praise Yahuwah. That's just food for thought. Praise Yah. I'm not teaching that as doctrine, but that's just food for thought. Who would have that kind of power to not even receive the apostles and to cast people out who would? Praise Yah. And you look at the characteristics, this obsession with excommunicating folks like that. The self-aggrandizement, loving to be first, loving to have the preeminence. I was not a whit behind even the chiefest apostles. Praise Yahuwah. Prating against us with malicious words when Kepha, Yochanan, and Yaakov, who seemed to be pillars. You see what I'm talking about? Praise Yahuwah. That's why it makes me wonder. That's why it makes me wonder, because I see all 3 of these characteristics of Diotrephes in Paul, in Shaul. Praise Yahuwah. But that's as far as I can go with it, because I don't have any hard evidence that that is who Yochanan was really addressing, but it does make me wonder. But just getting back to just where what we're originally dealing with, brothers and sisters, the question is, are you in a mind control cult? I brought out 3 characteristics of Diotrephes, which is one of the best example, in my opinion, of a mind control cult leader in the Bible, in the scriptures and the writings. Praise Yahuwah. And brothers and sisters, my hope and prayer is that if you're in this kind of situation, that you can connect with some of the things that I'm saying. That some of the things that I'm saying that you're experiencing now, you're able to put a finger on it. You're able to say, oh, wow, this is what I've been feeling the whole time. And if you're in a situation like that, you need to get out. Because, see, I know what it's like to be in a situation like that. And see, when we were in this mind control cult, this wasn't a thing where people were so deceived that, nobody knew what was going on. No, others knew something wasn't quite right there, but they were afraid to leave because it was instilled in us from the pulpit, you can't be saved anywhere else but here. If you leave this ministry, you can't be saved. And so out of fear of not being able to be saved, people would stay. People would endure abuse. People would endure mistreatment. Praise Yah. Is this you? Can your ruach resonate with the things that I'm saying? Are you in a place where you know it's not right, but you're afraid? You're afraid that you can't be saved anywhere else because that's been embedded into your spirit. You better run for your life. Praise Yahuwah. And if you need help, contact us. Contact us through our email address, praise Yahuwah, that's in the description box, qodeshnation@gmail.com. If you need counsel, if you need help, praise Yahuwah, if you want to break free, you need somebody to hold your hand through the process, we'd be glad to help you because we've been through it. Praise Yahuwah. Yah gave us the favor to be able to escape such a situation, and we'd be glad to help you escape. Contact us. Contact us right away. Don't delay. Don't drag your feet on this because you need to run for your life, and you need to run for your life now. Praise Yahuwah. If you find that you are in a mind control cult, praise Yahuwah, because that's not Yah's will. That's not Yah's will for His people. Read Yechezkel, Ezekiel 34 sometime. It talks about the false shepherds that are selfish, how they scatter the flock, how they use, abuse, control, and manipulate people, and how Yah said He's going to punish them. He's going to punish them, but He said He Himself is going to go forth and He's going to find the lost sheep. Praise Yahuwah. And He's going to put true shepherds over them, and He's going to lead them to green pastures. Praise Yahuwah. And so read that sometime in your free time, Ezekiel chapter 34. Also Jeremiah 23. That talks about false shepherds as well. Praise Yah. And how Yah is very much aware of what these men are doing. Praise Yah. And Yah has their number. Yah is going to seriously, severely punish these men. Praise Yahuwah. And so if you are such a man, if you yourself are a mind control cult leader, you need to repent or you're going to the lake of fire. Because you have a lot of blood on your hands. You need to cry out, moan, and wail in sackcloth and ashes because you are this close to the lake of fire. You need to repent. Praise Yahuwah. So brothers and sisters, that's all I have for now. And with that, I will say, Shalom.